And so you wonder if why aren't people listening and actually doing the right thing, the thing that is the solution? And so what I wanted to do today is empower all of you to work with your networks using a few future thinking skills. And these are a set of really doable, very easy activities that you can use with your networks, regardless of where they are. You can do it virtually or in person. In person is always kind of nice. But you can engage your stakeholders where they are so that you can really move from knowledge to action. Now, we have 4, of course, wonderful experts who we're going to have a conversation with here in the next half an hour. After that, we're going to engage you and ask you what you think. And then after that, actually, I'm going to do that first, Himanshu. It may make sense because all of you may be so persuaded by our wonderful experts that you change your mind. So maybe we do it twice. So we're going to start with a mentee, and then we'll just forget it for a while. Then we're going to have a conversation, and then we'll come back and look at the mentee results. And I will share then in the last bit of our time together today, some specific things that you can do. One, to know where are your networks? Are they really optimistic or really pessimistic? Are they very influential, or do they assess themselves as not very influential in nature-based solutions? And then once you know that, you have a map with your reference networks, and you can start in the places that are most likely to close the gap between knowledge and action. So we'll get started. Himanshu, I switched the order, but would you kindly, in the chat box, everyone, please look at the chat box, and you are about to see a link. You all probably are familiar with Menti. So is it there in the link now? So
Yes,
go to the link and then please enter the voting code. Oops. Let me go back myself.
So please go to menti.com, and you can use the voting code 1045239. It's also in the chat. We are pasting it again.
Okay, so everyone, let me ask you the first question. And again, Himanshu, if you do this, will you give me a verbal cue to make sure that this is working? Because I can't see anyone. So the first question that I want you all to go to Menti and answer is, right now, overall, is the future of nature-based solutions headed in a better direction? That would be a 10. If you're completely, we're headed in the right direction and we're already making some progress. Or are we going in the wrong direction? Is it a worse one? That would be more around 1. So on a scale of 1 to 10 right now, is the future of nature-based solutions headed in a better direction or a worse direction?
Coco, I do see votes coming in. So now I would encourage everyone to vote. We have received a few. So
can you by any chance put those up on the screen, Himanshu?
Yes,
I shared that link with you. If not,
yes,
it doesn't matter. We can take a look afterwards. But as you guys are putting that in, make sure that everybody takes the opportunity. It's super easy. Right now, overall, is the future of nature-based solutions headed in a better direction or a worse direction?
Hi, Coco.
Yes.
Himanshu, Sid here. Some of us are getting a message, me included, that the voting is closed. And it says, please ask the presenter to open voting.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I see what you mean. Sorry, guys, give me just a moment. Let's see, how do I see what I need to do. Excuse me, I just need to do it.
I think you've summed up the entire session.
Exactly.
Okay, at least I am getting the message that I can vote, but it may be because I also have the privilege to see the votes coming in.
I wonder if it makes a difference. So guys, I'm so sorry, but just troubleshooting on Menti, it says the voting is closed.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're gonna do, how to open voting. Could someone help me by looking up how to, never mind, maybe I have it.
Yeah, Coco, if you wish, we can continue with the next.
Exactly.
And in the meanwhile, I would figure it out.
Oh, that's perfect. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, sorry, reset the whole thing. So let's start out. Do this. Let's just do it manually for the moment. So that the point is that our wonderful experts may actually change how you feel once we start talking. So take, if you would, a blank piece of paper, and if you would, draw a horizontal line like this, if you can see that, and put on the scale of 1 to 10 like this, and then answer the question on a scale of 1 to 10. Is, when you think about nature-based solutions and the future, is that future getting brighter and better, with 10 being maximum? You really are confident that the future of nature-based solutions is the best it could possibly be? Or do you feel that it's really getting worse? In fact, it couldn't be worse. That would be a 1. So on your paper, put a little mark where you are. Okay. Next question. On that paper, draw a horizontal, vertical line. And same thing, put the number 1 at the bottom and the number 10 at the top, like this. 1 being worse, 10 being the best. And here is the next question for you. When you think about the future of nature-based solutions on a scale of 1 to 10, and again, now we're looking at the vertical axis, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much influence do you personally have to shape or influence the future of nature-based solutions and help decide whether it gets better or worse? I'll read the question one more time. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much influence do you personally have to shape or influence the future of nature-based solutions? Are you really powerful, or do you feel that you don't have very much influence at all? Really powerful is up by the 10, and not much influence at all might be down by the 1. Okay, now that you have filled out your personal 4 square, just set that aside. And now, thank you, Himanshu, for the prompt just to get on with things. If our 4 experts could turn on their speakers. So we have Sid, Lily, Lin Jun, if I'm saying your name correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful.
And is it Patricio?
Yes.
Or who's our 4th? Wonderful. So here we go. Sid, Patricio, Linjun, and Lily, if you could turn on your cameras. Now for the next, half an hour or so, we're going to have a discussion. And for everybody out there, what we're doing right here, please imagine, this is me playing like the narrator role. Please imagine yourselves in the next lecture that you give at your university, or the next network conversation you have with the friends of eco-based adaptation, or whatever, just even with your family or friends around a dinner table. Please imagine yourselves having this conversation, and we'll debrief afterwards. So, okay, to get started, I'm going to ask all of you, how did you do? Where were you on a scale of 1 to 10? And again, this first question is, how do you assess the future of nature-based solutions? So Sid, could I just ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we? Is the future of nature-based solutions bright? And if so, why? Same if you put yourself down by it too. Just share. And I'm going to do that with all of you. Yeah.
Thanks, Coco. I would say, so just very briefly on my background as there, I look at it from an engineering lens. So I'm a civil and coastal engineer. I come from a coastal city in India, and I've lived in coastal cities throughout my life. Looking at coastal hazards, how do you reduce them, and specifically where and how can we work with nature to conserve nature and reduce hazards to people. And from that engineering lens of reducing coastal hazards, managing risk with nature-based solutions, I would say I put myself down as a 6 because I would say I'm cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. Okay, yes. That's good. You are an engineer. Okay. Tell us more.
So I think that we have, we have got used to using technology as we've been discovering. Like when we've been working with concrete for centuries actually, and we find that concrete works really well to keep seawater out, and we've got used to that. And we have reached a level of comfort simply because we've been trying it and possibly failing so many times with all of our hard infrastructure and great defenses. Thousands of experiments globally to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We now have design standards and codes where people tell you exactly how you build this wall in order for you to reduce your risks. And I think the move to nature-based solutions is sort of a little bit experimental at this stage, even though it's not something that's entirely new. Before we had concrete, we were working with nature, we were living with nature. And in order for us to get back to that, but of course, that was a very different world earlier before we had concrete on so many levels. Not just, of course, climate change and sea level rise, increasing hazards, but then also population. Like we just didn't have as many exposed coastlines and densely populated places where we had these hazards. And so I think in getting back to working with nature to reduce risks to people, we need to be experimenting more, and we need to be figuring out exactly what works under what situation and where, to the point where even though I'm an engineer, I'm an academic engineer. I'm not the one on the ground, building the project and signing off on that liability sheet that says, yeah, you asked for a risk reduction of X and my project is going to give you that. And if it doesn't, then you can come and shout at me. And that's sort of where that's the level of confidence that we need to get to. That's the cautious bit. And the optimistic bit is that there's actually so much movement globally in order to get there. We recognize that to reach that stage is multiple tiny steps forward. And for example, I think the best and most recent example I can think of is I've been working as part of a very large international team with the US Army Corps of Engineers, which is one of the biggest organizations in the US responsible for coastal and riverine waterway projects. And within the Army Corps of Engineers, there is a specific division called Engineering with Nature. And their mission is to move the needle on this. And they put together an international team of experts all across disciplines, across different types of practice, policy, and action, and science. And this team just recently released a set of guidelines for how to think of nature-based solutions. And where do if you are someone who says, hey, I'm interested in this and I want to find out more, is it a wetland you're thinking of? Is it a dune you're thinking of? Is it a coral reef you're thinking of? And of course, I'm talking about this in very specific focus of reducing hazards to keep reducing coastal and flooding hazards to people. So I'm talking about a very tiny subset of what nature-based solutions can actually do. And within that tiny subset, we're trying to move the window. And the Army Corps is an example that. And there, the World Bank has guidelines similarly, and there are other, the guidelines that you have, IUCN has put out recently. And so there's so much global effort across all of these organizations. The IPCC special report had a section on ecosystem-based adaptation and, what is needed, where does it work, where does it not work. And so because of this global movement, I'm optimistic that we will get to that point where we're confident enough that an engineer will say, yes, I'm going to plant mangroves here for risk reduction, and I know exactly how it's going to work. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. And by the way, just playing my narrator role for any of you, I noticed for me, I'm just like dying to go on and find out what everybody else thinks. And as a narrator, that's exactly what you want to do with your networks. Often as experts, you start assuming, well, yeah, I'm the expert, so I know the answers. Why aren't they following me? If I know the right thing to do, are they dumb, or how come they're not following me? And often it takes that sense of, well, what do you think? And why do you think that? It's that conversation that often allows innovation and unpacking solutions and all of that, as well, to find out again where people's main concerns might be. So super, Sid, thank you so much. I hope we can talk more. Let me then just swing over to maybe Lily on your scale of 1 to 10. And again, I'm going to repeat. And by the way, you guys know this, but we're all coming from different disciplines. And so we've just heard an engineer. I just loved it that you started with concrete. That is so fun. Just like an engineer. So Lily, what's your perspective when you think about the future of nature-based solutions on a scale of 1 to 10? Do you think it's getting better or worse?
Thank you very much, Coco. I think that it's getting better, and my
another
rating,
optimist. Okay.
my rating would be 7.
Oh, even better than Sid. How about that? Let's hear it. Why?
So first of all, I am wearing the hat of someone that works for the UNFCCC Secretariat. And my particular work entails supporting programs and projects that are aimed at transforming knowledge to action and supporting communities to build adaptation and resilience. And from that side of things, we are working and collecting a lot of knowledge. So on a daily, I see a lot of things coming out, policy briefs, working papers, drafts, dialogues, a lot of things coming up with nature-based solutions. And for me, that makes me very optimistic because I feel like it is gaining a global attention. And then when you look at things like what Sid has already mentioned, the IUCN global standards, you look at what the World Bank is doing, what the Friends of the Eco-Based Adaptation Network are doing, you feel very good from that side of things. Now, when I wear my second hat, which is having worked in the development cooperation side of things, and being from a background that has been working with development funding, say donor funding from GIZ, Austrian Development Corporation, from CEDA, from the former DFID, UK Aid, US Aid, you see that a lot of donors are having emphasis on environment and social safeguards, including nature-based solutions. And a lot of projects that are receiving funding right now are projects relating to or comprehensively on nature-based solutions. So for me, that gives me a lot of hope, knowing that people on the ground, just as optimistic as the donors, people want to put money or people want to support things that are potential to change what the world is expecting. And now when I go to my third hat as a potential actor, because as I have been introduced formally, I am a fellow, and what could happen to me after being a fellow? Maybe I go back to my country and I am an actor. And for me, it's very optimistic to know that nature-based solutions is not an alien concept. It very much relates to what communities have been doing. And we just need to repackage the knowledge or repackage the way that we communicate the science to integrate traditional knowledge systems, to integrate what indigenous people know, so we can communicate that this is what you have been doing already, but you can do it even at a bigger scale, and everybody has a role to do it. So I am very, very much optimistic. Over to you, Coco.
Boy, I feel great listening to both you and Sid. That's fantastic, Lily. If I could play a devil's advocate, you mentioned before you came, by the way, Lily and I just work across the hall from each other, so I'll see you later today. But you mentioned working for development cooperation. And you mentioned from your experience that a lot of development cooperation projects, you see them bringing nature in. Is this kind of surface level, like a fad? It's popular to talk about nature-based solutions, or would you say that there's something more enduring there than just a trend? Playing devil's advocate, what would you say?
So first of all, I think that naturally it's a trend, unfortunately, but practically or on the operational side of things, people have come to see that nature-based solutions have a real potential. So I have a background in water resources management, and Sid, you would maybe know some of this stuff. When you're planning a water system, or let's say for an urban area like my home city in Kampala, you would plant fecal sludge management plants or wastewater treatment plants, and people think about the science, the engineering of things, how to get fecal matter from one place to another place and what to do with that at the end of the day. But then they forget about the environment, because you're drilling earth, you're leaving barrow pits, you're draining wetlands, you're impacting so much on the ecosystem. And now where nature-based solutions come in to offer a potential to complement what is being done on the development side of things is such. So for instance, I know that donors are very keen to say, like I said earlier, environmental and social safeguards. If they must give you money to develop or construct a wastewater treatment plant, you should include in your project aspects that deal with protecting nature, catchment management, to ensure that it's a holistic development process. So you are having to treat your waste at the end of the day, but then you're not polluting the environment, or you're conserving the wetland, which you can use for natural filtration of water. So for me, it's a whole loop of things. Nature-based solutions are a wake-up call to donors, and they're increasingly seeing that and trying as much as possible to incorporate it in all that they do and where they put their money. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I see what you mean about getting to scale. That's an opportunity and a challenge as well. And for all of you, your mind might be firing like mine. I've got so many questions. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat. And in the last third of our discussion together, we are going to start identifying, well, where are the gaps and what does need to happen in the future? So take notes of those, and we're definitely going to get there. Okay, so I continue with my little homemade paper survey, and I've got Sid, you're at a 6, cautious optimism. Lily, you're even farther out, you're at a 7. Patricio, could we come over to you? And then Lynn, you and I'll have you as our roundup and our discussion. So Patricio, on a scale of 1 to 10, when you think of the future of nature-based solutions, do you think it's getting better or worse?
Thank you, Coco. I'm going to be even more optimistic.
Oh my gosh, you guys are so, what did you eat for breakfast today? Okay, let's hear it. Why?
I'm going to be even more optimistic with an 8.
An 8.
I can explain it from 2 perspectives just occurred to me. This is improvised, by the way. And one is a political institutional one. My background is in policy, business and global studies. And the other one is one of lived experience. I will start with that. And I've been working in climate change since probably 2006. And at that time, it was not part of the language of the times. And although I have seen spikes or or momentum in different years or a couple of years since then until now, I think in this moment, there is a special momentum to believe that nature-based solutions, right, are really an alternative, because it is under the umbrella, right, of course, a trend, as Lilian mentioned, or something big, which is climate change. I remember people I used to have arguments with about this. In that time in Valdivia, in Chile, we were working on ecosystem-based adaptation through natural marshes right around the city. By the way, the city where I live there have been using the wetlands for rainwater since the 70s. I don't think there was an environmentalist movement during the 70s where I live, but it existed and people know that it works. But the discourse has changed a lot. Today, I have seen people who used to deny climate change from certain political sector embrace it before other candidates in the debate, because they know it is really important for them to reach their audience like that. So I see that type of momentum in this moment, that we can judge, as Lilian said, to whether it's good or bad, or how can we understand that this is a trend or not, but it is. From a political institutional perspective, I think, and imagining, right, that maybe the policy streams theory I was thinking about of Kingdom, there are three different streams. One is the problem. And the problem today is well defined, I think. Or since people are starting to feel the problem, right? Once the problem reaches you, it really becomes the problem for many people. So either it's because of a drought or because of or intense rainwater or flood or whatever, people is starting to feel it. So the problem is being defined and people is capturing that. From the policy side, and now it's mostly on my experience, probably in Boston, where I'm based, I've seen innovative policies, and I have seen policy actors really engaging into this and crafting good policy and policy instruments that account for really yummy carrots, and for really yummy carrots that is difficult not to eat. Really, it's the best of the meal sometimes. So I think that they are being designed this, and it's being attractive. I see people studying this at least in my field, right? I'm saying, okay, how can I contribute? What else can be done? And it became a challenge for many. And finally, the third stream is the politics, which I already mentioned a bit. So today you will have probably overwhelming support in lots of parliaments, or I'm not talking about the politics in the US in the last years, of course, it might be a bit different, but in many places, right, on climate change. And when you have those three streams more or less aligned, you just need something to happen, right? Like a key moment, like an election, or unfortunately sometimes a disaster, right? For the push to go even further. So that would be just an assessment of why I am so optimistic.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I hope we can circle back. I'm just going to pose one question. What does it take to get alignment?
The theory said that works like, the example they use is like when there's a plane and suddenly a window breaks down, and there's like something that sucks all to the outside. And that's the moment where the problems, the policy and the politics start meaning. What does it take? As I mentioned, generally it's an event, a big event that could be political, could be natural, could be something. It's an interesting theory. Sometimes it works like to assess things to the past, but sometimes some people have also used it as a prospective tool.
Okay, so what I'm taking from that is that one role of networks like this, which we're building, and this is like the first of many of you know each other, but we'll be knowing each other now for the next years. So if I understand you, Patricio, the network knowing each other, talking to each other, reaching consensus as experts, that happens over years and years. And then when something happens, you're ready. And you can say, well, experience shows from engineering and Sid, and experience shows from our development cooperation projects that you mentioned, Lily, that this is really a way forward. And then a group of decision makers over in this area where some mess has happened, they'll say, the experts agree. And some experience from the built environment and from development cooperation seem to indicate this is the way to go, and that builds their confidence. And then you get more and more direction choosing towards nature-based solutions.
Yes, it's if one of the streams is not mature enough, I would say if it has not been worked throughout the years, probably policy change might not happen. That is all theoretical, but we can discuss about it.
Okay, super. And to play devil's advocate, that is awesome, super hopeful, especially Patricio, since you put yourself down as a maximum, the future of nature-based solutions is a 10. It sounds like it takes a lot of time.
I said 8.
Oh, excuse me. You said 8. You did say 8. I wrote it down here. Okay, Lin Jun, are we going to get a pessimistic voice from you on a scale of 1 to 10 with all of your expertise? When you think about the future of nature-based solutions, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think I'm gonna disappoint you by giving a pessimistic voice here, because I also put down a 6 here.
Okay.
And I'm gonna explain why. I very much echo with all the peer speakers about the optimistic side. Also, I always frame myself as a realistic person as well. But here, I think all the changes that all the speakers have mentioned, not only in academic, but also in the policy side, it's obvious that nature-based solutions has been take up quickly, and also the rise of nature-based solutions in not only discourse, but also practices are obvious. And forgot to mention that I'm also an academic. I think Himanshu also introduced that in the past 2 years, I've been working in an EU Horizon 2028 Nature Vision project, which is looking at how nature-based solutions can help cities to address various societal challenges. And now I'm back in China, so the score is based on what I know about nature-based solutions, all the practices, all the changes happening surrounding us across the globe, but also based on my own observation as well, mainly in China. So I'm grading this from 2 sides or 2 trends. First, like I mentioned, the policy and academic riots, we see the rise of nature-based solutions, which I think the future is quite bright. The second side, I'm afraid, is a little bit pessimistic, which is that the retreat of the public, which might be a surprise to many of you, because we always think about that the public or the normal citizens, they would wholeheartedly embrace nature-based solutions, because it's something that they have been practicing even before the term has been created. But here in China, what I observe is that not only in those governmental-led large-scale nature-based solutions project, there are relatively very limited level of public engagement, but also in the grassroots experiments, which are relatively a retreat, what I call it. Because like from my own experience, like 20 years ago, I remember on the rooftop of my ancestors' house, my grandparents, they will grow fruits, vegetables on the top of it. It's just their normal practices. But after 10 years, that has been gone, and it's cemented with all the engineering solution to deal with the heat, deal with the, for example, the water filter into the house, things like that. And I think, and also even in the rural village, my dad sadly decided to take out the lakes, which he thought is dangerous for those children living nearby. And he turned it into a parking lot, because there are cars coming in our houses, in our family. And every time we went back to the rural village, we need a parking lot. So As you can see, although working with nature is something inherent to most of the people, I think today, even for the elderly or for the parents' generation, but it is also that this group is kind of like leaving out nature-based solutions or abandoning nature in their daily practices. And I think yesterday, the talk about the shifting mindset is really important. It's because like people always think nature is messy. Nature means it's not well managed. And even in our modern community here in cities, if we see something kind of like with a lot of plants, people might think, oh, it's abandoned lot. And someone needs to take care of it with well-trimmed for example, the urban landscaping. So for that side, I think it's the future of nature-based solutions is not that bright. But I put 6 rather than 5 or 4 is because I also see this regeneration of the nature coming back to the community. I'm conscious about the time, but just one example is that in the resettlement community nearby my house, nearby where I live currently, that the community residents, they voluntarily trying to build a community garden within their community. It's because that there are so many empty lot there, and for them, they just think naturally that they want to grow something, even within the cities. So with the help from the local management or manager, and then they together create a community garden. So these kinds of grassroots is also emerging across the cities. And I think as the way forward is mainly to change people's mindset, working with different groups, also let them know that nature is not messy, nature is beautiful, and nature is not only about mosquitoes or snakes. It can be bees, it can be butterflies as well.
Lin Jun, I love this. I love it for many reasons. I also appreciate your candor in sharing some of those very human experiences, even from your own personal life, but also profoundly because you see ideas matter. People's ideas about what does a good life mean? Does it mean there's no nature around? Like, for example, when I used to work at United Nations University at the time, I was doing a lot of field work. So I was spending lots and lots of time on farms, on boats, and, all over the place, but mostly in the global south. And I remember one time I had some downtime between, I don't know, appointments. And so I pulled out my notebook, and the little kids all came around because I was a visitor. So I guess I was kind of novel. And we started drawing in my notebook. I gave them something to write with. And the little kids, it was so interesting because the little kids started drawing pictures. I asked them some question like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Something completely lame, but what grown-ups do to little kids. And the little children in the place that I was started drawing what to me looked like a desolate, polluted, not great place to live. Definitely urban, no trees, nothing like that. And when I was a little kid, we were always drawing a little house and lots of trees and flowers and bees and stuff like that. And so later we talked about that. And I talked with one of the local, I don't know, the mayor or something, or maybe it was the imam. And he said, well, around here, the idea of a better life means going to a city, and the color scheme is like rust and brown because that means industrialization. And industrialization means a job and a chance to move from absolute poverty to, a little bit better. Maybe your kids get to go to school. And for me, it was so interesting because I think, and I'm from a different place and a different background, I have tons of privileges, but I think of a good life very much in a color scheme of green. I think of parks and trees and water and not too hot and all of that. And it's just so interesting how our ideas also very much kind of affect how people interact with nature. Around here, there's a big debate in the city that I live in, whether people should asphalt the surface in their gardens. That's a big thing. Like people don't want to deal with grass and weeds and things like what you said, Lin Jun. And increasingly, Bonn is getting dry. Germany typically isn't a dry place, but we're starting to feel some impacts that are unusual. And the city wants people to have surfaces that absorb water, like what you've heard, the sponge city idea. And so there's a big debate about convenience and this and that. And it reminded me what you said about, do you pave a surface so there's a place for your car, or do you leave the lakes? And I think those debates are really, really important because people want to live a better life. And at a big high level, interacting with nature is one of our chances to create a resilient future, but we can also undermine that and kind of impair ecosystems. Okay, so that was amazing. Sorry that I just talked so long. So everybody, do we have any pessimists out there in addition to our wonderful conversation and our wonderful experts? Is anybody pessimistic? I know for me, I put myself at a 3.
Okay, if I can quickly reflect the mood in the room, I'm getting
please.
Also in the chat, and obviously I will toss in my own view as well in between. Is there are a few questions. People definitely don't doubt the validity of idea of applying nature-based solution, but there are definitely debates about the short-term or the near-term benefit versus long-term investment. You plant a tree today, you get the shade of maybe in 10 years. So, that always the question of priorities. Second is also the sort of communication barrier it might create, and also the public perception. And then on top of all that, I would like to add from my side is that it's not just a question of acceptance within the community of practice, but rather at the policy level and also at the very grassroots level of what Lin Jun just shared. We also have audience sharing their experiences, for example, from Jordan, pointing it, and I can also share my experience from India. I mean, immediately the cost benefit of adapting to nature-based solution may not be in short term very beneficial. So I do see the acceptance within the learned community going up, but in reality and practice, we still are far away. So my personal rating would be around 3.5. Sorry for being devil's advocate in this case, me.
Yeah. And what happens, by the way, for all of you, if you're imagining, and again, I want you to do this. I would challenge everyone to do this once before you go to bed tonight. You're going to talk with someone, unless you're absolutely in pandemic lockdown, you will talk. And even then you can call someone. I challenge everyone to try this activity right here and just listen, because what you've seen is, I mean, you and I aren't the same people, but it's really interesting to find out, why do you think that? And every one of you provided a reason, an experience that you've had that gives you that assessment. So that's fantastic. There are a bunch of comments and questions in the box. And Himanshu, thank you so much for helping me monitor to keep us broadly on track. There's so much to talk about. One, I want to promise you that after this session, I'm going to send to Himanshu so that he can share with all of you a bunch of briefs about these. I promised that I would give you some activities that you could do with your networks or your friends or family to actually explore all of these different questions about the future of nature-based solutions. By the way, you can apply these to any number of topic areas. So I'm gonna, don't be nervous, you're gonna get those at a minimum as these kind of briefs, these written documents. But let's push forward. I mentioned, by the way, that I put myself at a 3, and it's almost philosophical. On a scale of 1 to 10, I think there are lots of individual efforts which are completely inspiring. And as you heard me asking Patricio, Wow, Patricio, it sounds like it takes a lot of time to get alignment. And my night job is I'm an IPCC lead author. So I'm reading hundreds of articles. And sometimes, to tell you the truth, I feel really worried. I feel really, really worried. And in spite of how, and it's that gap between what we know and what we actually do. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning. But sometimes I feel kind of bad about it. So that's why I put myself at a 3. And it's just perfect that I get to meet all of you today, because you inspire me and help me understand ways to close that gap. Let's push forward. So everybody, what we're going to do now is have a really similar conversation, but not quite as in depth. So now I'm going to ask, of course, our panelists and all of the room, the second question. You've already heard it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, when you think about the future of nature-based solutions, what about you? Where do you fit in? How much influence do you personally have to shape or influence the future of nature-based solutions? And again, I've just got this little old-fashioned paper. This is your vertical axis. So just put a little X right now where you are. I'll give you about 30 seconds because we all influence each other. And
sorry to jump in. If you wish, we also have Menti ready, and hopefully it works this time.
yeah, okay. Himanshu, have you taken this over, or do I need to put it up?
There I can paste the link and people can go and vote. So I can run it hopefully from my side.
Okay, well, why don't we do that for a minute? Then everybody still do it with your pencil or your pen on a scale of 1 to 10, mark where you are. How personally influential do you feel? Do you feel like you can really influence the future of nature-based solutions, or not so much? Scale of 1 to 10. And then everybody head over to Menti. And I'll give you just a minute. Anybody just holler if I'm going too fast. And also give a verbal cue if you have any trouble. Me, for example, I'm trying to present and it says that voting is locked. So I don't know if we got the problem solved. Okay. So now we're going to go to the next slide. This is the second question that I mentioned. Okay, and the second question is, again, how much power do you personally have to shape or influence the future of nature-based solutions?
So Coco, if I can jump, I do see now votes coming in on the very first question. So if it is fine with you, we wait for 10 seconds and then I'll move to the next slide.
Perfect. That's just perfect.
So for those of us who missed the code, please go to www.menti.com and use code 51384439. We also have pasted it. And in a second, now I'm going to the next question. So when you refresh, you should be able to see the second question. So please, you can vote for both the questions now.
Super, Himanshu, and just give me a verbal cue. What we're going to do, by the way, after this next round of conversation, then we'll put the results up and then we'll have a conversation together. Himanshu, can I start talking now? Everybody, you can continue.
Yes, exactly.
Can hardly be quiet.
So Coco, why don't you go ahead, and if you like, you can come back to me in
exactly.
And by then I would have all the results together. I already come in.
That's super. So everybody, you've marked where you are on the paper. You have a minute or a couple of minutes more to do the Menti. So this time, let's start with Patricio. When you think about your personal influence, and by the way, I know it's really hard. It's not very comfortable to tell an audience of people I am totally powerful. Let's just hear, if you would let me put you on the spot, how how empowered are you to affect the future of nature-based solutions, Patricio? And I'm going to ask that question to all of you.
Yeah, of course, it would be right. It's not, I wouldn't say a 10 at all, because I know that the influence and the power I have, right, is probably I can only reach or influence, right, a group that it's closer to me, or maybe through my academic work, right, I can go further. But I still think there are reasons why I think, right, that I can have some influence, and I go with a 6.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And is that because you believe in the power of your publications to inform, or what? Why 6?
Not because of that, actually. I don't think I have that yet. I think, of course, together with a team, we have been able to translate nature-based solutions, and before I said, right, termed as ecosystem-based adaptation, and help people understand the co-benefits, and try to adopt the language, right, to the people that we are talking to. So that took time. And we did the same, right, for trying to include renewable energy, right, in the curriculum of a school when there was resistance. The same resistance we found, right, in among people who thought that it was not that much of a good idea. But experience sometimes starts telling you things. You screw up several times, and then every time we try it again, we see results. So I think the team that I have worked with, especially in Australia University at the Transdisciplinary Center of Environmental Studies, and here in Boston at the Sustainable Solutions Lab, we have learned a lot about how to empower communities, right, and give them the right information for them to feel that the solution they can appropriate the solution.
Okay.
And it's not something imposed. That's why I think that's I think is my contribution.
Okay, excellent. So by the way, if you guys wonder what I'm doing for Patricio, when I asked him if he thinks the direction is going in the right direction or not a good direction, and when I asked him how much influence he has, that, by the way, is putting him in this quadrant. And what will happen after this conversation is I'll give you guys a key to interpret where you fit, or where the people in your networks fit. And then a next couple of steps as we round things off about where you can, and here we go with our results, how you can actually invite those networks to align and create some positive results, like you just said, Patricio, for nature-based solutions. Okay, awesome. Himanshu, since you just put this up, this is the second question. Could you go
Yes.
to the first?
Yeah, just give me.
And then panel will come back to you. Just quick breaking news. Okay, look at this. So for a few of us, maybe out of how many people? 23.
Yeah.
It looks like about, now let's see, how do we interpret that? The average for people who think things are getting better is around 5. Cautiously optimistic, like you said, Sid. And each one of you has a reason why you think that. And for those of us who think things are getting worse, we're kind of, oh, that's super interesting. I would love to talk with the 7. I would love to talk with what makes you think that. But anyway, what you're doing here, if you guys are in around a dinner table, or if you're at a restaurant somewhere, you can literally do this with a piece of paper and just kind of map everybody out and have a really insightful conversation about why. Why do you assess things as that positive or that bad? And what happens with this is the most informal time. I mean, this is completely, it's not too rigorous, but with that conversation, what you start understanding are people's concerns. And when you understand people's concerns or reason for optimism, that is part of a key to help you understand where you can start engaging around this topic of nature-based solutions. Really, really important. And again, just to reiterate, one of the reasons it's so important is we experts know the solutions. Why is nobody doing our solutions? And it's often, part of it can be because our knowledge is not relevant. If someone has a piece of land and it's covered with lakes, and they also have cars and little kids, the thing that's relevant for them would be to know, we see you have this issue you're concerned about. You don't want the children to fall into the water and maybe drowned, or you need a place where you park your car so that you don't create tons of mud. There may be things like this that have nothing to do with nature-based solutions from your perspective, but when you know where your audience, where their starting point is, you can engage empathetically with what's relevant for them and hopefully accelerate your progress in whatever part of nature-based solutions you're working on. Now, this one is pretty interesting. Personally, how much influence do you feel you have on the future of nature-based solutions? And this is just so interesting. Almost everybody who feels they have little influence is kind of like, not so much. I might be an expert, but I'm not that great. Part of that could be natural modesty that people have, and part of it may be some other things. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. On the bright side, just about as many, well, actually, I don't know if it's just about as many, but well, it doesn't actually matter, but let's say the average for those of you who think you have some influence is about 4.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. So now what we have is each one of you, if we created a plot like this, we would have a map of where most of the network lies. And for all of you as practitioners or decision makers or researchers, you would know where you put your first effort. If almost everybody is in one quadrant, then you'll probably design your engagement around activities that really follow in that quadrant. If there are equally distributed across two, then you'll divide up your time. Okay, maybe enough said. Let's go back to our panel, and then I will send you all of these written materials, and hopefully we'll have a chance to engage in the margins of this academy. Okay, so Patricio, we heard you. You feel relatively empowered. That's super. Lin Jun, what about you? When you think about your ability, you're in, one of the biggest, most dynamic countries in the world. China has a reputation for, really doing things around nature-based solutions. And I'm sure that's not everything because it's such a big country. Where do you fit in? How empowered do you feel?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think 6 is my favorite number, so I put 6 again.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I have a reason to it as well. Like I mentioned, I'm an academic. I also publish articles, policy briefs, reports as well from our project. But I don't think I'm powerful with those because I can't imagine will there be anyone outside of the academic will read those things. I think it's only for peer academics or even policymakers like me will read those publications. But I think my true influence that I could have is actually also because I'm a teacher. So I have students
That's
to
great.
engage with. And just this morning, I talked to a master student, or not a master, I think 4-year, the final year of the undergraduate student who is working on the final project on researching nature-based solutions in the city of Ningbo, where I located. And I just convinced him that nature-based solutions is not only about governmental large-scale parks, community gardens, green roofs, vertical greenings, they all count as nature-based solutions. And this boy, I think he will enter academic area in after the graduation, or probably he will just go to do NGO or to do his business. But it's by influencing these students, our future generation. I think, like I mentioned earlier, that environments can shape people's mindsets. Like people living in the urban environment, it is very difficult for them to imagine to set their foot in a muddy road and tell them that this is good for nature and good for people. But although environment shape people's mind, I think education has the power to make changes, to change their mind. So yeah, I think with that role as a lecturer in the university, I think I'm powerful in that way.
I love that. Thank you. And Sid, I know that you're also not only an expert in your field, but you're also an educator. And I saw you nodding, and I was nodding inside. Maybe I was also nodding with my head. That's really great. So for everybody in this quadrant, I've put Lin Jun right here. She is optimistic about both her personal influence as well as the direction of nature-based solutions. Really interesting. We'll have a set of activities for someone like you who can move the needle even further. And that's coming. What about you, Sid? If you, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel personally influential or maybe not so much?
I was actually pretty low on that scale, but I think Linton made an excellent point. And so I've actually revised my score a little bit based on
I
that.
cheated. That's why we always do this first, because we influence each other, which is good. You didn't cheat.
So I would say I'm at a 4 on this one.
Where were you initially?
I was at it's debating between a 2 or a 3. But I would
Okay,
say I'm
yeah.
at a 4.
In that scale, maybe between 2 and 4, tell us a little bit more about that.
I think it was mainly because, again, exactly as Linjit said, my work is academic. I run these models, publish these papers, and it's not. And as an academic engineer, I'm very aware of the gap between theory and actually putting something into practice. That is one reason. And the other reason is also the really good point that Patricia made about, you need to have all of these streams coming together, bottom up and top down, need to align. And, I feel like local municipality or a local practitioner in some ways would have a lot more say in actually implementing and making NBS a reality. And on the other end, finances as well, and policymakers. And so I think as someone, I see myself more as someone who's helping inform these different groups. And for that reason, I was low. But again, as Linjun said, I'm not just someone who's informing these groups, I'm also someone who's teaching students and teaching them, how to think about nature-based solutions. What encompass nature-based solutions? How do we think about them? And from an engineering perspective, how do we integrate these into our practice? And so in that respect, I think that I do have a little bit of power there. Yeah.
I love that. And what you see here, because I'm challenging you all to do this before you go to bed tonight, what you see there is that by having these kinds of conversations, and by really, this method, by the way, kind of unloads, it allows people a space for speaking, but it unloads some of the I'm right, you're wrong, you're crazy, you're up in the night kind of thing. And it builds empathy, because when Lin Chun said, well, I'm a teacher, maybe that's when I saw you nodding, Sid, and you're like, oh, actually, I do have influence. I forgot about that important thing. And that's really important, because in addition to experts, we're also humans and we have to do this together. So I thought that was great. So Sid, where you are is you're down here in this quadrant. And I'm going to reveal what that might mean for you and moving forward. Awesome. Lily, what about you? Scale of 1 to 10, how much influence do you feel that you have to shape the future of NBS?
So for me, it would be a 5. And 5, for the following reasons. So first of all, I remain very optimistic, as I indicated earlier, but optimistic to the potential that NBS has, knowing that it has gained a lot of global and regional attention, as I explained earlier. But I also recognize the barriers to the 10. So if we look at the scale, earlier I scored 7 and not 10, for instance, because I recognize that there's a lot of barriers limiting the scale to 10. And for me, I see myself empowered to engage in dialogues and support the implementation of the science or the traditional knowledge that complements or makes, that causes the nature-based solutions to come to reality. So I see myself more at a point of supporting the parties or the countries, the people in charge of making this a reality. Because I recognize that we will know the science, we will have a global attention, everybody will be talking about NBS, it will go on and on. But if the people in charge cannot do anything about it, policy-wise, or support the implementation on the ground, empower local structures, then nothing happens at the end of the day. So for me, I am for engaging where the space allows me. For instance, as a youth, if there's a youth dialogue that that is engaging policymakers or presidents, ministers, people in charge, people who will make this happen, then I am for that. If it's reviewing a paper or highlighting a paper that Lin Jun and Sid and Patricio have written about nature-based solutions, then I am for that. I will gladly come for that and highlight the pros and the cons, the rational assessments that are pointing towards the merits and demerits of nature-based solutions to influence the mindsets of the people in charge. So that's for me.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you. Now, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I wish that all of us in this room here together, and the 30 of us or so who are here, could actually sit down over a meal and really talk. Maybe someday we can do that.
But with this, Coco, allow me to jump in once again. We have barely now 15 minutes left, so just timekeeping. And there were a few points coming regarding the case studies, because our participants today and you as well, you have highlighted different aspects. So a bit of announcement, we have a series of events only focusing on case studies. And there we are showing a lot of case studies from the global south and from the global north. We had the very first event yesterday, and then there are 2 more planned tomorrow. So please don't forget to join us later today, obviously, and for the case studies specifically tomorrow. So with this, Coco, back to you.
Okay, super. So in these last couple of moments, well, 15 minutes isn't moments, it's not like seconds, but what I want to do now is give you what each one of these, because I'm sure you may all be curious, what does it mean if I'm here or down here? What do I do then? So I'm going to explain that. I'm already going to follow up with a bunch of written material so you can read and discover more. And I'll give you one more activity that you can try tonight before you go to bed. So this would be actually 3 questions. You're sitting with your friends or your family or talking with someone on the phone. You say, hey, let's do an experiment on a scale of 1 to 10. Are we going in the right direction, the wrong direction? And then you say, okay, next, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you powerful or not so much? And then the third, I'll tell you what that question is in just a minute. But first of all, Himanshu, if you could allow me to share my screen, or if you could go to slide 6 in the PowerPoint presentation.
Whatever you prefer. Now you should be able to share your screen though.
Okay, let me just do this real quickly. So everybody, if I can find that. Okay, here it is. And hopefully this, yes, there we go. So you can see this. There you go. That's what you saw me doing with this piece of paper. So find the intersection. You're super powerful, you have no power, it's getting better or it's getting worse. Now where those intersected, that's your quadrant. Which of the 4 squares did you or most of the people in your group land in? You got it? Okay, well now this is what it means. For me, by the way, I felt like things are going in the wrong direction. I put myself at a 3. And when it comes to how much influence I have, I put myself at a 7, because here I am working at the Climate Secretariat and I'm managing some teams, and they've got some committees, and I get to talk with ministers all of the time. And I write speeches for our executive secretary, and I get to talk with you. And that makes me feel like surely I could do something. So the intersection of things are going in the wrong direction, but I can do something about it, that lands me in a quadrant where I can use action skills. And you're wondering, what are those skills? These I'm going to give you one example, by the way. That's the third question. But there are lots of things that you can do if you personally find yourself in that quadrant. Or you can also do these if you use mixed social science methods, or if you ever have to talk to groups of people, you can apply a set of really, really simple things that will help unlock people's minds. If they think things are going bad, but they do feel like they have some agency, you want to focus them on what they can do, hence action skills. Okay. Now, in my little sketch, I found that Lily and Sid are down here. They think it's getting better, but they're not so sure that they have that much influence. They're very modest. So what do you do if you're someone like Sid or Lily who thinks the future is getting better? That's great, but I'm not so sure that I matter, that I have much of an impact. There are a group of activities called forecasting skills. And what forecasting does, it allows you to think about some future directions. Sid, for example, gave us some examples of how engineers are incorporating nature-based solutions and uncovering how things that people may used to do and just take for granted dovetail with modern engineering practices. And so he's already thinking. In fact, Sid is one of those experts who's defining the future of engineering with nature-based solutions. So he knows those. So Sid, you could step back maybe with your class or with your colleagues, or the next time you give a talk to the International Corps of Engineers or whatever, and you could work out some forecasting, some forecasts. If this happens, that could be the forecast. If this set of things happen, that could be the forecast. And as you do that, you will be evaluating yourself and finding, oh, actually, I could have some influence here. Or like, this is something Lily and I find a lot, and maybe some of you, if any of you are involved with the IPCC, I often, because I'm reading all of this worrying literature, I often think, man, how does what I do have any difference? And then I go to bed and get rested and get up again the next day. And I think, oh, wait a minute. Actually, here's a gap. What I need to do is I heard this thing, countries were talking yesterday and they said they didn't know this. And I have the idea, oh, I could go talk to Sid and I could talk to Lin Jun and tell them, hey, did you know policymakers don't know this? And Sid or Lin Jun would say, oh, well, we've got that answer. Here's the answer. And then I would take the answer and take it back to the policymaker. So my point is that if you feel that things are getting better, but you're not empowered, forecasting can help you identify areas where you personally can have leverage or where your networks can have leverage. And I'm just checking on the time. We have a few minutes left. Now, what about Lin Jun and Patricio? Actually, I hope I said that right. Sid and Lily actually are down in this square. Now, Patricio and Lin Jun, you're just our professional optimist experts, and it's so good to have you. But for you guys, you feel influence and you also feel like the future is getting better. So for you and people who are like you, we want you to keep going. And there are a set of things that you can do around gaming and involving people in collaborative creation and creating those even better futures. And without going into a ton of detail, we need more people like you. And it is amazing how we all love to play games. And when we get involved in collaborating and building things together, whether it's a gaming environment or something else, you unlock possibilities and you help align people, and they literally can build things together, whether it's digital, virtual, or out there in the real world. Now, what about this? Will actually bring me to the last square. I promised that I'm going to actually take down my screen now and give it back to all of us. I promised I'd give you one more question that you can do tonight when you're with your friends or your networks or calling someone. There's one more thing. Some of us feel like it's getting worse and you have no power, and you feel like you're on a train that's just headed in the wrong direction and there's nothing you can do to get off or change the direction. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's what simulation skills are about. You can simulate worst case scenarios, medium, best case scenarios. And so now here's the third thing. Since the time's almost up, I'll give you all of this, but let me tell you what that third question is. Because what we want to do for ourselves and for all of our networks is to unlock the potential to improve the situation. And here, of course, we're talking about nature-based solutions, but the future is ahead of us. We don't even have to change it because it's not there yet. We are literally creating and building together. If, however, you feel like you have the zero influence and the current momentum is so powerful, it's just really going in the wrong direction, what do you do? Well, there's one entry point. It's really easy, and it's the following question. It'll sound really familiar because we've been speaking about this for the last 75 minutes, and it's on a scale of 1 to 10. So after you've done this little foursquare activity, you can say, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say I put myself on a 3 in terms of are things getting better or worse? Do I feel more or less influential? The question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would it take? What would you need to see in the world to move your score one step in a more positive direction? And it's that one step that unlocks potential for change. Here's a little personal anecdote. I was taking a course, actually a certificate course on futurist thinking. That's, by the way, where I get all of these activities. And my homework assignment was to do this. And because my friends are scattered all over the world, I foolishly chose to do my homework on Facebook. And that is a dangerous place. There are a lot of people out there who are just waiting for any chance to troll you or to, you know, get into a big argument. Nevertheless, I took the subject of my homework, which was the future of food. And I put up a picture of some laboratory produced protein. And I did these 3 questions. And what happened was not a single, I do have wonderful friends, but no one resorted to the kinds of, let's say, misbehavior that you can sometimes see on social media. Every single person wanted to say, oh, I'm a 2, or I'm a 10, or I'm whatever. Everyone really engaged really simply. Some of my friends wrote out an answer and some didn't. But when it came to this question, what does it take? What would it take to move you just one step in a different direction? Let's say a positive direction. What happened there is that people started coalescing around what they thought the problem was and what they thought were ways forward. And that was actually transformative. I only had about 100 friends take part in this little homework assignment. But what happened was afterwards, I could step away and say, I really think I understand this whole debate a little bit better. There's a cluster of people who are concerned about this. There are a cluster of people who really care about that and this. And similarly, there are a set of options that people are weighing in on that might be starting points to move things in a better direction. So that's been my personal experience using some of these some of these future thinking skills. Let me land this whole thing now with a sincere thanks to Sid and Lily and also Lin Jun and Patricio, Himanshu, and all of you who've been really active in the chat. And also, I hope this has been useful and will inspire your conversations tonight. I'd love to hear how it goes. So Himanshu, maybe back over to you with a very hearty thanks to all of you.
Thanks a lot, Kara. Thanks. Definitely. I mean, I personally, I get the privilege to listen to you running us through this exercise. Last year you did that. This year also we are doing, and I find it's very powerful because a lot of scenario, we do come with our own baggages, we do come with our own expertise, but to get to see the larger picture, the way you presented, I guess definitely it would be thought-provoking for some of us. It would allow us to sort of step beyond what we normally do, and also at the same time anticipate what is likely to happen in different quarters, in different possibilities. And as they say, prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So thanks a lot for that. And definitely thanks a lot to Sid, to Patricio, to Linjun, and to Lily. Thanks for your amazing participation. I guess it's not an easy exercise. I had the privilege of being in the background, but you guys were put on the So thanks for playing along. And definitely we would like to thank all the audience. You guys have been amazing. The comments that are getting, the participation that we are getting, I think it's always, very warming for us as organizers, because we put in a lot of time without knowing whether this sort of topic would be of interest. If you are investing your 90 minutes that won't come back. But at the same time, we see your participation, we know on the right track. So thanks for that. There were a few questions, how they can have future access or further access and reading materials. So I turn to Coco if you would like to reiterate what you were saying in the beginning. Regarding having access to some of the reading materials, you would be forwarding them to me and obviously
Yep.
be uploading them.
Yep, that's right. I'll do it right now.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So again, thanks for your time. We would like to now take a break. And in 1.5 hours from now, our next event would be starting. So that is at 3 o'clock German time. We are going to talk about the formal and informal urbanization. Informality of urbanization, it's something that is very, very crucial, I guess, for more than half of the world. And what sort of, a very planned approach in an informal world, it almost sounds paradoxical. So how would we do that? How can we make nature-based solution applicable in dynamic countries? So something very interesting to look forward to. So thanks for your participation, and we see you on the other side in 90 minutes. Thanks a lot. And
thank you, Coco. Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
this was very
you, everybody.
thoughtful.
Thank you all.
Yeah.